Well, that was lovely. Thank you. I think maybe we should just quit now because... thank you very much for coming. Let me also add my thanks for your contributions to the Kent Opportunities Fund. I can't tell you how welcome it is to some of our students, so thank you very much. For those of you who were expecting to see Michael Gove tonight, let me explain something. We plan these things quite a bit in advance, and we've been trying to get David Suchet for a long, long time, but he's always doing something. But he did say, if anything comes up at short notice, I could be your man. And he is. Michael Gove sends his apologies. We booked him before he was in the cabinet. He's now... Actually, I better be very careful what I say, because he was in the cabinet a few minutes ago. And given the speed of change in our country, who knows, he might be Prime Minister or out in his ear, I have no idea. Anyway, our guest tonight is here. We're very grateful to him. I'm a fan. So much of your work, Shakespeare to Edward Teller making the atomic bomb, to Hercule Poirot, which we'll get on in a moment. You've never been an understudy to Michael Gove before, though, have you?
No, but it's very nice to stand in, and but I've done well with standing in my career. In fact, my big chance at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company was at the very last minute. I was understudying Orlando in As You Like It with Eileen Atkins playing Rosalind, and I was just joined the company, and it was 48 hours before press night, and the principal had an accident, and I had to learn the whole role in 24 hours and go on stage to the national press. And I moved from dressing room 12 to 1A. And I never left there for 13 years. So thank you. Yes, thank you, Michael Gove. Who knows what's going to happen after tonight?
If Theresa May wants to call us, we'll take the call, but in an hour, because we've got a lot to talk about. Tell us a bit about your family background, because it's fascinating, isn't it? South Africa, Lithuania, Kent.
Yes, well, I had the great privilege of doing Who Do You Think You Are? Did anybody see Who Do You Think You Are? Well, it was wonderful, because actually, for those who watch the programme, the question always is, do you know what's going to happen? And the answer is no. They said I was flying somewhere, and I said, is it cold, is it warm? They said, it might be cold. I said, where are we going? They said, I'm not telling you. And everything that happened actually happened as you would have seen it. But I learnt such a lot about my background. I thought we had Russian-Lithuanian connections, but I learnt all about my Kent connections in Sandwich. My great-great-great-grandfather was a captain of a sailing brig out of Sandwich and brought coals from Newcastle down to Sandwich. I know. But he did. He really did. And so I learnt all about that. So yes, I'm a sort of half Russian, because it was Lithuania at the time, I'm a Kent sandwich, really. But I have great roots in this part of England, which is lovely.
In terms of your childhood, did you see a career as an actor? I mean, it's not something you normally put down when you talk to your career as a teacher.
No, I never really saw myself as I was growing up as becoming an actor. I wanted to become a doctor, because my father was a very renowned gynecologist and obstetrician. And when I couldn't do that, I wanted to become a photographer. And I couldn't become a photographer because you had to have a union card to become a photographer, but you couldn't get a union card unless you had a job. Whoa, what's that? So that was catch-22. So that never happened. And then I got seen playing, am I allowed to say the Scottish King's name in this theatre? Do you know who I mean? And I was seen in a school play, and my English master said, try and join the National Youth Theatre. And that was the beginning. And I sort of developed and went on from there. But you know how we look back at our lives, a certain time in our lives, and we see, even my grandfather who took photographs of me, and I would always be dressing up. I would always be dressing up as a soldier or as a cowboy. But I was told by my brother that it wasn't just playing games. If he was supposed to be dead, he was really dead. And I took it very seriously. So maybe subliminally that was always in me, but I didn't know it.
But your father was a renowned doctor, as you said.
Yeah.
How did he respond to the young man who ended up in Lambda learning to be an actor?
He didn't respond well. He was very upset because, and in a sense, I make light of it, but I can understand why, because when I went to Lambda, it was in 1966. When I wanted to be an actor, it was in the early 60s before I went to Lambda. And it is what it is now. The profession is still very uncertain. And my dad came from a sort of Edwardian background, and he was a very established figure in the medical profession. So to suddenly have and John, my brother, who was a newsreader in our Classic FM, he was a great intellect and went to university. And then suddenly this live wire comes in and says, "I want to be an actor, Dad." So he found it very, very hard. He couldn't quite get onto it. In fact, he only really felt okay on two occasions. Once when I joined the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, and then when I became Poirot, and I actually invited him on the set, and he got it then.
You'd made it.
He was pleased.
Tell us a bit about the craft or learning to be an actor, because the word play, the word acting, has a not entirely serious connotation, doesn't it? And yet it's a very serious business.
Well, for fear of being too serious tonight, I have a great philosophy about acting and why I do what I do. Because, Gavin, you're absolutely right. There is a certain sense of frivolity about my profession. And I felt that myself in my early days. And I thought, what am I really doing? What am I doing? And I went into the dictionary and I looked at the word act and I looked at the word actor and I looked at what do I do? What do I do? I become a different character. Well, I don't become a different character. That's not what I do. That's not what I do. I become a different person. But why do I become a different person? And then I had a Eureka moment. I had a moment when I was looking, I said, let me have a look at a play, let me have a look at Shakespeare, let me have a look at dramatists. And I suddenly realized, and this is something that stayed with me for nearly 50 years now, without an actor's voice, and I mean actors, men and women, without an actor's voice, dramaturgs would have no voice. They would have stayed with the novel. But if someone's going to be brave enough to write something to be performed and to give it away, then I have a very important function. And my function is to serve my writer to the extent that even though that writer may no longer be with us, like Shakespeare, to study the play and try and find why the writer put my character in it and what is my purpose in the play. Because once I find that, then I can be a very strong spoke in the wheel we call the play. And that has really, really served me all my career and given me a really good reason for persisting and continuing in a very serious way.
When you do that and when you read a script for theatre or television or whatever it is, how far do you become the character or the character becomes you? I mean, what is the relationship that you have with some of these characters?
Well, let me start by saying that when I look at a play, the last thing I now ask myself is how am I going to play it? In relation to what I've just been saying now about serving the writer, the first thing I do is to take my character out of the play and find out what's missing. You know when you make a stew and you're cooking, we all taste it, don't we? But we don't taste it we taste it to think, what else can I add? So what's missing? So once I've found that real flavor and that real meaning of the character, then it's my job to become that person. Not to play act, but as much as possible to become and represent for my writer the person that they have created. They don't write thin people unless it's a farce or a comedy. They write three-dimensional characters or greater. So I have to develop that. And what happens in that development and over a period of time and preparation and study, it infiltrates. You can't help it. The personality of the person that I want to become, I have to get to know that person to such an extent that I can tell you what that person would do when they're not on the stage. And I develop a life around that person, what was happening before the play. Because any piece of drama is just a window, just a simple window, but it's part of a whole life. So when I come on stage, I don't just bring in what I'm going to be doing, I bring in a history with me. Not that you would know what that history was, but hopefully when I arrive, you will already see a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 dimensioned figure, and they can invade. They can actually invade, and you have to sometimes say, "Ooh, be careful."
Does that mean that from time to time your wife has to live with Edward Teller or Hercule Poirot?
I think that if I'm being absolutely honest, I think my wife has had a pretty tough time because somebody asked me to write my autobiography, and I said, well, it should be my biography written by my wife called The Men I've Lived With. Because I think it is, as much as I may not think that I become, or facets of the character that I become are there, I think she would, well, she's here tonight. Would you say that? Yes. Yes, there you are.
Let's talk about Poirot. That bears out much of what you have just been saying, because there are obviously very many ways in which one can play that character. You play him as a multi-layered character, rather than a comedic figure. He's clearly a person of great intelligence, but he has his foibles and so on. I mean, that's what makes it work, isn't it? Because it's the three-dimensional character that you were talking about.
Well, I had the great honor to take over from Peter Ustinov, and he was a wonderful Poirot. When I started reading the books, however, and there's been many Poirots before, and there will be many Poirots after, but when I started reading the books to study the character, and I read them pretty much in the order that they were written, and I read every single book before we even started filming, and I spent months in preparation. I saw on the page, both physically and personality-wise, a character that I had never seen portrayed before by other actors. And this was a challenge to me, not to suddenly become somebody different, but taking what I said right at the beginning of this evening, I then would look at that character and take him out of chapters and see what was missing and see the qualities that I needed to fit into that. And although he did, especially in the short stories, he was a bit crazy and funny and gaggy and all the rest of it. But that was only because he was eccentric. It wasn't because he was trying to be funny. Eccentrics don't know they're eccentric. Nobody, and Poirot, he didn't know he was vain when he said, I'm the best detective in the world. It was said with total belief. It wasn't said arrogantly, but the person opposite would say, he's such an arrogant man. But he wouldn't think that. So, I wanted to portray him. Where I was lucky in that I am short, and he is short. I think he's 2.5 or 3 inches shorter than me. He has green eyes, I have brown eyes. But apart from that, I could physically resemble him very easily for the fans that read the books. And unbeknown to me, it's that my physical appearance and the way I played him then served Agatha Christie, which then served her readership, who suddenly watched And by the end of the series, my viewing figures were 750 million. And mostly Agatha Christie fans, which was lovely. That's the greatest compliment I could have had.
I'm going to throw open to the audience just a few minutes, and we've had a lot of rather lovely questions that have come in already.
Oh.
And there's one exactly on this point. These are email questions and so on. I like this one very much. You talked about the Poirot, likened the death of Poirot to the death of a dear friend. How attached do you become to the characters that you play in that sense?
Well, for Poirot, I played it for 25 years. And when you play someone for 25 years and you know, even whatever other roles I may be doing around that time, and there were very many, and I didn't play him every year, so I'd be on stage doing American roles, I'd be in Hollywood doing Hollywood pictures, I'd be doing radio drama and all this. But coming back to him, I would then, with Sheila, watch 12 to 15 hours of previous episodes, reread all the books, pick him up again, and then become him. And because I spoke with an accent, and because I had a moustache, I would speak like him all day, because to suddenly come out of it and go into it on a film set was very different. So in answer to your question, yeah, when I was on the set, and very much you're living with this man. And this man that I got to know over 25 years, I got to know him so well that I can, even to this day, I can switch in my head to see his worldview and go out, and I know exactly what he would choose, I know what he would eat, I know what he would do. So, yeah, when he died, it was very emotional for me, because I had done every story, and he was then gone, and I felt a great loss. I'd lost my best friend.
But I'm trying to think, so when you said you adopted the accent as well, you went into the paper shop and you asked for the Times?
No, this is on the set.
Oh, only on the set. I was slightly worried that you were going to pubs in Britain.
And funnily enough, without the moustache, I was fine. I was fine. I could talk to anybody.
Did you get nervous? Do you get nervous live performance or on a set? I mean,
not in film now. I don't get nervous in film or television. I still get insanely nervous before every single theatre performance. I get insanely nervous.
Is that a good thing, do you think, for you?
Well, they say nerves are a good thing. I think they're dreadful. I hate being nervous, because it gets in the way of what are you nervous about? What is an actor nervous about? Well, I'll tell you what he's nervous about, or she is nervous about. It's forgetting your lines. If you're on stage, you get nervous because you might not remember what you have to say. You know what you know the person you're going to become. It's that fear of suddenly drying and letting everybody down.
But looking on the bright side, it's quite obvious that even though we can hardly see the audience, you are relating to this audience. That's the bit that presumably drives you on, isn't it? You've got the nerves. And in
a theatre, I don't do this. I can't embrace my audience like this. But we have what is known as the third eye. So we'll be playing like a comedy,
That's like we're doing
a comedy. But this eye will be out in the laps of my audience, and I'll be feeling where the silences are, where this is. That's something that happens. Yeah.
And one further question, then we'll get the lights to come up and see if there's anybody left. Your voice.
Yes.
Well, it's a beautiful voice, may I say.
Yes.
Do you look after it? How do you look after it?
I have to look after it. Here's another piece of thing I discovered, that the mask through which the actors first spoke through in Greek drama all those years ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the mask which they cut the hole out of and the actor spoke was called the persona. And if you look at that in Latin terms, persona or per son, it's through sound. You are a person, each individual person, you're a person, I'm a person, through sound. And there is not one person in the world that has the same voice print as another person. And that's why people impersonate people. And that's why you have a personality. And things like that. So the voice, my voice, I only found my true voice in my 3rd year at drama school. My first 2 years at drama school, I was speaking up here a bit like that. And I remember lying down on the floor, and my voice coach was pressing my diaphragm. Now it would make headlines, of course. But I didn't complain. And she was pressing my diaphragm. Yes, she was pressing my diaphragm. And she was saying, sigh out. And I was going, And she did it again. And she said, now really relax. I went, whoa, what was that? And she said, we found your voice. Now sit on that sound. And I developed that, and then that became my person.
And you, as part of the nervousness, I mean, do you worry about getting a cold, getting sick, all that kind of stuff?
No voice, no play.
No voice, no play.
No voice, no play. It's the worst thing in the world. I was in a French series in the summer, and they allowed me to speak English. Amazing. I spoke English when everybody around me was speaking French. Thank God I had an English script, so I knew what they were saying. And then I had to go to Paris to dub. 2 days before going to Paris to dub, and they'd set up this studio in Paris, and people were employed and everything like this. A big number. I was going to be there for 3 days to dub my whole role. 2 days before, I got laryngitis. What do you do? And I was frantic. And of course, the more nervous you get and the more frantic you get, the more tense you get and the more the voice goes. But thank goodness, I have various little tricks and remedies.
Remedies?
And it did work, thankfully. But the voice is so important. And you look on any actor's dressing table, and there won't be... There'll be lots of vocal zones and this and that to keep the voice.
Let's bring up the lights, if we may, and ask for some questions from the audience. Yes, there's lots of people out there. We've got a couple of microphones, so who would like to be first? Okay, who'd like to be second?
No, I must say, do ask questions, because I'm not coming back. So do. It's just like friends and family, so do.
Yes, there's a gentleman over there.
Hi, Mr. Suchet. First of all, can I say thank you very much for coming to our university. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure the audience would agree. Just 2 questions for one. First of all, the new movie coming out, Murder on the Orient Express, starring Kenneth Branagh. I wish it was you, not just read him. But first of all, have you by chance seen a private screening of that movie to see what it's like? And second of all, seeing that movie being advertised, does it bring back memories for when you participated in the Orient Express?
Because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on the film, and I can't comment on Ken. He's a wonderful actor, and I hope he has a great success. Of course we do. I hope everybody has a great success in this industry. It wouldn't be fair otherwise. But it's a wonderful story. It's a fantastic story. And I'm sure it will hold up. Her story is extraordinary. She had the most wonderful mind. But I haven't seen it yet, so I can't comment on it. But I know when I do see it, because I did it only a few years ago, it will bring back very many happy memories.
Well, maybe you will have to come back, because somebody's asked who has the better moustache, you or Kenneth Branagh? And it would be unfair to press you on that now.
Oh, no. Absolutely mine.
Yes, there's a gentleman there. If there's anybody on that side, just give a wave and the lady at the front will find you.
Yes, I just wondered if you could tell us just a little about how you worked with Diana Rigg on Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Oh, wow, you've hit one of the most important roles I've ever played in the theatre. I saw Ben Gazzara and Colleen Dewhurst play that role in 1974 on Broadway when I was out there with the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company. I sat at the Gods and I watched Ben play this role, Ben Gazzara. And I said to myself, well, how old was I? In 1973, I was in my 20s. And I said, one day, I want to play that role. And it occurred. And I got that role with Dame Diana Rigg. And the dear late Howard Davis was directing, and that was absolutely an example of real study of the text that gave me my full interpretation. Because, I'll let you into a little secret, everybody who does play George usually ends up playing a very drunken man. Edward Albee has him only have one drink. And if you study that script carefully, you realize that he is the puppet master. And if he only has one drink and gets everybody else drunk, and the play goes on and the play goes on, and then you realize that he has to, for Martha, for those who don't know the play, this is a very boring session, but he destroys her imaginary child. And the reason he destroys it is not out of cruelty, it's out of love. And I believe, and I played George with her as a man saving his marriage. And that was my interpretation.
Thank you. Well, I did see you in that production, and I thought that both you and Diana Rigg were absolutely superb.
Thank you.
And thank you for your answer.
Thank you very much.
Some more thoughts? Yes.
Good evening, Mr.
Good
Suchet.
evening.
One simple question. Do you think that Agatha Christie would have been pleased with you?
Good question.
Do you know, I must say, she died obviously before I played the role. The nearest I got to feeling I'd made it was when her daughter, Rosalind Hicks, who is now no longer with us, actually came up, and they were very well known, Rosalind and indeed her mother, of hating anybody that did Poirot. Her mother, Agatha, never enjoyed any portrayal of Poirot at all. Rosalind came up to me one day and she said, "I think it's time that I might say that Mum or Mother would have been fairly pleased." And that's as near as I got to it. But I tell you this, if you told me she was walking in the room now, I would leave.
It's also, I mean, it is just one of the great characters of literature that, you know, along with Holmes and Philip Marlowe and Poirot.
What a gift for a young actor to be given this.
Some more thoughts? Yes, there's somebody at the back and the gentleman at the front.
I think one of the wonderful things about your Poirot is the way he walks. I wonder how long that took to work out.
A very long time. Do you all know the story? Have you ever... Oh, gosh, you're going to be horrified when I tell you. And it's absolutely true. When I saw, we did some takes of me as Poirot, film tests before we actually started shooting, and I watched myself as Poirot, and I sort of was okay about it, but I thought, I'm moving like David Suchet. I'm not moving. How did Poirot move? And then I suddenly remembered there was a quote in one of the books, and I actually found it. And the quote went something like this: Poirot crossed the lawn in his usual rapid, mincing gait, with his feet tightly and painfully enclosed within his patent leather boots. So I spent a month on Briar filming. I was on Briar in the Isles of Scilly, trying to get this mincy walk. And in the end, I did a trick. This is going to horrify you, but it's absolutely true. I did, and it's in my book, so I can say it. When Lord Olivier was playing Lord Foppington, he held between the cheeks of his buttocks a penny, so that when he walked and turned corners, he couldn't just turn like this, because the penny would drop out, right? So he had to go like this. So when I did the same, I couldn't walk like this because the penny would fall out. So in the end, I had to learn to squeeze my very tight, because if you do that, you can do this going home. Anybody can do this. You may get locked up, but you can do it. So in the end, I could walk like that. That was it. Now, I have to tell you, Gavin was not expecting this.
I expect the unexpected. And the penny will undoubtedly be in the British Museum of Theatrical Memorabilia, if it's not already been auctioned off. There's somebody right up at the back, and there was a gentleman at the front. Can you see the second from the back row, and then the gentleman right at the front as well. Then I'll come over to this side.
Hi, I saw you perform in The Importance of Being Earnest a couple of years ago, and I was wondering how it was different becoming Lady Bracknell compared to your other characters.
Compared to?
Your other characters.
Being a woman with a voice like mine. No, that was when I got the producer came to me and said, I think you need a comedy, and I think you'd be wonderful in The Importance of Being Earnest. I said, there's absolutely nothing for me in The Importance of Being Earnest, except the old butler. I said, the characters are all the young men and things like that. And she said, think of one other character, the most famous character in the play. And I said, well, who? She said, think. So I said, well, the most famous character in the play is Lady Bracknell. Yes! And I said, you're mad. You're absolutely mad. And it turned out to be one of the most challenging things I'd ever done in my life. And also, you had to be so brave, because in rehearsal on the first day, I had to ask for a practice skirt, something I'd never done in my life. And also, I had to lose as much weight as I could, because I had to wear a boned corset. So, and little heels. That was all right, because I'd played in Amadeus and lots of restoration work. But it was a real challenge, and actually, using my method of working, I found a lot about that character, and especially the bit about the handbag and being found, that was very. It suddenly occurred to me, looking at the script and seeing how many words were written about where it was found rather than the handbag, that made me realize that the handbag line had been made famous by a particular interpretation by Dame Edith Evans. But in fact, the horrific thing that affected society at that time, which Oscar Wilde would have known, were cloakrooms in railway stations, because they were meeting places for illicit liaison between two men. And to be found there would have cast aspersions on the whole of that young man's pedigree. And that's why I played it like I did. I threw the handbag away, and I said, yes, well, a handbag. But where was this handbag found? In a cloakroom. And that's what all the critics picked up on. And it was fun, because the audience, having read it and having talked to people, I could feel this moment on stage. I could feel it in the audience. They were going, ooh, here we come, here we come, here we come. So, thank you. Nice question.
There's a gentleman down the front here, and there's somebody on this side. Yes, there's somebody there too. Right. So maybe, yes, if you're first, we'll get to you. I promise we'll get to you.
Good evening, sir. It's a two-part question, really. One, who have you most enjoyed working with, either on stage or on screen? And the second part, is there anybody in the industry that you haven't had the opportunity to work with, but you'd love to?
I think my favourite person has to be Zoe Wanamaker. We've done such a lot together over our lives, and we first met in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in 1975, and we've been together through many wonderful pieces of drama, mainly on stage. We've done a couple of televisions together, but and really difficult pieces, and only made possible, and the glory of the way we played them was made possible by our relationship, that we got on so well as artists and working together. There are so many people I would still like to work with, but the one actor I wish I had worked with was Paul Schofield. And it was him that really influenced me in my early years when I used to go and watch actors, including Olivier and everybody else, Gielgud and Richardson, Ralph Richardson. But for me, Paul Schofield was the epitome of the sort of actor that I would like to become. And whether I have become that or not, I don't know. But it would be invidious, I think, to say, who now would I really like to work with more than anybody else? There are so many that I admire and think are really great artists. And indeed, the young that are coming up, I think are much, much better than we were in our day. I think that we've got some terrific young actors. I'm very excited about the state of our theatre and the potential. Thank you.
Is there anybody that you wish you hadn't worked with?
Once again, the list would be...
You can name names later. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you. David, I first saw you perform in Theatre Royal Norwich 20 years ago when you played Salieri. With Martin Sheen playing Amadeus. And I'm just wondering, what was it like to play against Martin Sheen? And also, have you ever been back to Norwich?
Well, yes, I have gone back. I've been back to Norwich, actually, in a couple of plays. Norwich is wonderful. Playing with Michael was challenging. He was a very young actor at the time, and he got a wonderful Mozart. And it's very interesting. It's rather like a relationship between Iago and Othello. And so the relationship between Salieri and Mozart, and in rehearsal you can feel the tension between the two characters. And we had to work very hard that this didn't rub off. When I played Iago and Ben Kingsley played Othello, the same chemistry was beginning to... We had to be very careful. But Salieri, for me, was a most extraordinary experience, one of the most extraordinary experiences of my career, from the point of view that I was not only directed by the late, great Sir Peter Hall, but Amadeus itself, we actually restructured the whole play, because I asked the question, what would you feel? What do you want the audience to go away feeling about Salieri? And he said, I want them to feel that he was horrible to Mozart, but that I want them to feel sorry for him as well. And I said, well, interesting, because I saw Paul Schofield play the role. And he tried very, very hard to bring out a quality of humanity within that role, that he almost couldn't stop himself doing what he did because he was so jealous. But the melodrama in the play turned it into a sort of pastiche in moments that we thought were over melodramatic. So Peter Schaffer actually, as a writer from a successful play, took all those out. So now you can buy the play as he originally wrote it, and the one I did in London and on Broadway, the last third that Peter Schaffer and Peter Hall and myself reshaped. And that was an extraordinary experience, a wonderful experience for an actor to go through.
It was an amazing performance.
Thank you.
Were you surprised that a writer would do that, would listen to your expertise and your contribution and Peter Hall's?
As you've learned tonight, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for writers. My admiration for writers is such that, without them, I don't have a voice, and without me, they don't have a voice. I mean, we are absolutely together. And the fact that Peter Schaffer was that genuinely open to the change and really so excited by it, because he kept saying, yes, of course. And it was the most extraordinary period of rehearsal I think I've ever had, because we'd be in rehearsal and he'd suddenly jump up and say, no, that's melodramatic, you're right, that's got to go. You know, and it was absolutely wonderful. Mind you, there came a point when you get new pages just before you go on stage. God.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yes, no, a wonderful experience.
Thank you. That was a great question. Some more thoughts? Yes, over there. There's a couple of people over there.
Hello, thank you for coming. It's been really interesting so far. I just wanted to ask you about something a little bit different that you did recently, which was the episode of Doctor Who. And I actually didn't realise it was you until the very end of the episode, so which was good. So just wanted to ask you about your experience in that and how you managed to make me realise it wasn't you.
What a lovely question. Did you all get that? What was my experience being in Doctor Who and the character that I played? Let me tell you, it's the first role in 48 years as an actor. My agent rang and said, "You've been invited to be a guest in Doctor Who. Would you like to see the script?" And I said, "I don't care." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, I'm not interested in the script. Say yes. She said, "Why?" I said, "I want the scalp." I want to be in Doctor Who. Who wouldn't want to be in Doctor Who? And then the script came, of course, and I read this extraordinary character. Written by Mike Bartlett, who's now the writer of writers. In fact, I'm doing a series now that he's written called Press. He's a wonderful writer, and the character that I played was very complex for a Doctor Who character. He was quite weird and strange, and I wore this fantastic wig, and a lot of people didn't know it was me, and I loved that. I really enjoyed that when people say, "I didn't know it was you at first." That's a great challenge. But it was such fun. And you enter, and of course I was great friends with Peter Capaldi, who I'd worked with before and got into a Poirot as well. And we had such a lot to talk about. But you enter such a well-oiled machine, and I realized that's what people felt when they were coming onto the set of Poirot. After 25 years, it was such a well-oiled machine. Well, Doctor Who's been going for how many years? And you sort of enter this world. And I have got to see the TARDIS. They kept saying, "You've got to leave." And I said, "No, I want to play." Great, it was wonderful.
Thank you. There's somebody else over there. Thank you.
You said that you were very nervous when you go to the theatre. How did you get on with Long Day's Journey into Night?
Oh, that was the worst. Long Day's Journey into Night. When I say that was the worst, it was also the best in terms of an experience again. I keep on saying things like the best experience, and I realised tonight, as I'm talking to you all, I've been given the most amazing roles in my career, the most challenging of roles. Long Day's Journey into Night was never written to be performed. It was a gift to his wife. It says this play has been written in blood. And it wasn't supposed to be performed, at least till 25 years after his death, but it was put on within 2 years or 3 years after his death. And the character actually was the playwright's father, and a drunk, complete drunk, and he was an actor. And a challenging role, and the largest role that I think I ever played on stage. In fact, it was bigger than Iago in the end. Because when you look at the lines of Shakespeare, they're short because it's verse, and you may have 300 or 1,000 lines. But when you're looking at prose and they're long, and you have as many as that, then it's very, very challenging. Long Day's Journey into Night. I think I was more nervous in that play than any other play I've ever been in, right up until the last night.
Fantastic, really good.
Sorry.
He said you were fantastic.
Well, thank
really
you
good.
very much. I really appreciate that, because I think that was one of the most challenging I've had. Thank you, sir.
Tell us a little bit about press, because you're a press baron, aren't you? You're obviously a heart of gold, aren't you?
Well, no. Well, yes. I play. It's not a major role. I come in and out, but I'm the boss of a newspaper, But I had the great privilege, I don't know if anybody saw it, I played Robert Maxwell. Did you ever see that? Anybody saw that? Well, that was an insight to being a newspaper magnate or the owner of a newspaper. It's a wonderful script, actually. It's one of the best scripts I've read as far as the series is concerned by Mike Bartlett. It's about two newspapers that tend to vie. But he goes right into what goes on in the newspaper world, and we haven't had that quite on television before.
It's interesting that if you look back at films about newspapers, for example, a lot of them up until about the late 70s, early 80s, reporters tended to be the good guys. In the last 20 or 30 years, they've tended to be utterly despicable.
Yes.
It's quite an interesting social
is.
change.
And the press has changed in our lifetimes, hasn't it? The press has changed. And what do we feel about newspapers now? And what did we feel about newspapers when we were growing up? A lot has changed, and the headlines have changed, the sensationalism changed, and the power of papers have changed. The power of press now, I think, can alter elections. I think people are really, really swayed by what goes on in the press, and the press know it.
Including the Russian press, apparently.
Pardon?
Including what goes in the Russian
press. Well, that's why I think it's a great title. The title of the series is called Press. It's good.
Do you read your own reviews? Do you pay attention?
Yes, I read my own reviews. I wish I didn't. I don't like reading my own reviews, because you always get one that's not very good. Because and there's a lot of actors that don't read their reviews. I like to read my reviews because I like to read what you read. I like to know what's going out. I like to know what my public in the theatre mainly. I don't really read my film reviews so much, or my television reviews in the same way. But if you're in a play and you're contracted for, say, 6 months, I like to know in the first month, the audience now, the reviews used to be, what was written in newspapers used to be wrapped in fish and chips the next day, and it was all gone and nobody remembered. But now I can go to reviews of my work that go right back to the 60s.
Online.
All the reviews are out there for the rest of the world to see. And if you go and see a play, you can click on it now into Google and read the review of the play that you're going to see. Whereas, when I started acting, if you'd missed the review, that was it. You couldn't catch it. So reviews are important, and that's why I like to read them, because I now know what you have read and what your expectation may be, having read it. And that's the reason I do it.
Time for a couple more questions. Yes, right down at the front. And is there anybody? Yes, over there. We'll come to you in a second.
Hello.
Hello.
You just said that you were contracted for a play for 6 months. It just makes me wonder how you say the same words every night. And do you make it different? Does it become a chore? Do you worry more or worry less as it gets on? It just seems to me an odd job to have, to do the same thing.
It's a very odd job. My father was so right. It's the oddest job. No, I take the point, and actually I have just come to the state now in my life when I don't want a long run anymore, because it really wears you out. And these great roles that I've played, when I had the energy, I don't know how many great zonking great roles I have left in the theatre to play, because of what it takes out of you. And now that I'm in a certain decade, I hope to still do theatre, of course, but I don't know if I could do it, because for the very reason you say. And when you do 8 shows a week for 6 months, how do you keep that alive? How do you keep an actor has to learn tricks, and I have my own tricks, especially on a Wednesday matinee, especially after bad reviews for the show, when you can hear the audience and it's only 5 minutes to go up, and you can hear the audience's voice echoing in the auditorium. You think, oh, there's nobody here. But then I have a trick, like saying, there may be one person there that's never ever been to the theatre before. I'm going to do it for that one person. And you have to then try and pretend on top of that you've never said this line before, that you've never actually. So everything has to be fresh. And that's part of technique. That's not part of artistic creativity. That's technique, to make it sound as though it's for the very first time. Because you're coming to see me for the first time, I've got to make it seem like it's the first time for you. So, for me, for you. So if I play it in such a way, oh God, here we go again. I mean, you're going to, it costs money to go to the theatre, and it costs more and more and more. So we try and give you the best. The other trick I sometimes do, which is very morbid, I know, but it could happen, is that this may be the last performance that I ever give. And therefore, it's got to be the best.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
As a drama and theatre student, you've talked about theatre challenges. I'd like to know what you consider the most rewarding part of performing in theatre.
The most rewarding part of being an actor?
In being specifically in theatre.
Specifically in the theatre? Well, the cliche is true. And cliches are only cliches because they are true. They are this. You build up a relationship. Over an evening of exposing drama, and you're in a good play with a good plot and good characters, and you can feel that audience. You can literally feel that audience becoming involved. A very interesting point. When I was at Stratford, I remember that theatre becoming air-conditioned. We didn't have air conditioning up until the mid-70s. And that changed the whole atmosphere in the theatre, because we were no longer sharing and breathing the same air. It was continually changing. And some of my greatest experiences, especially when I was playing Shylock, for example, I used to, terrible, I used to give the technician 20p or 5p to switch off the air conditioning for the trial scene. Because and you felt the audience really share that atmosphere, and it was wonderful. And I think that live performance, when it's really exciting, and you can hear that pin drop, and you can get to a situation in a stage where all of you felt that. All of you would feel that, together. And why is it in the theatre that most people will react as one? What is that? You're not looking at each other, you're not doing anything, and yet 9 times out of 10, it's not just because it's a comedy line, but that sense of silence that you all felt is as loud to me here as a laugh would be if I was in a comedy. That would be as important to me as anything else. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm deliberately manipulating you. What it means is the play is having an effect on you. And if it has an effect on you, it's undeniable that it won't have an effect on me. But I can't change what I'm doing, but I can get very excited by the thought that you are all so involved. And you'll come off in the interval and you'll start really buzzing and sharing with the actors. God, what a wonderful house, what a wonderful house. That's exciting. That's really makes it so worthwhile. And that can happen with 3 people in an audience, as well as a full house. It's a great gift to be allowed to do what I've done. And I wish you every success.
Thank you.
Are you, just on that note, are you optimistic about the future of live theatre in our country? Because I know I speak to a lot of musicians and they say it's one of the great things, actually, because music is available all the time, you can sample this and listen to a bit of that. Actually, to go to a live performance is bringing more people in, they say, And I get the sense that the theatre, there's a great deal of excitement about that because it's live, for all the reasons you said.
It is that. And every now and again you'll get a play that sort of takes off, like at this season it's The Ferryman. And I've been in plays, mercifully I've been in plays where that play has been picked up. But we are, here I go again, we are an extraordinary animal, aren't we, on this planet? That we actually sit like you're sitting now, to watch people entertain you and then bring your antennae together to show appreciation. We don't have another animal on the planet that does this, you know. We don't hold concerts or dance or ballet or music. The animals don't play instruments, and we are an extraordinary creative force on our planet. And I think that the arts, and I really believe this in my heart of hearts, the greater the arts of a nation, the greater the arts and the performing arts, and we can share experiences together in the artistic world, I think it is a great healer. I really do. I really do. I think the arts are vital. I think they're important. I think they're unique to being human. And I think as such there will always be the hunger for sharing this live experience. I really do.
On that note, our live experience is coming to an end. Please will you thank David for a wonderful evening. Thank you. And just a very brief final word of thanks from me to you for being here. Thank you very much. There will be some ladies with shaking buckets on your way out should you wish to contribute any more to the Kent Opportunities Fund. But thank you very much, because it wouldn't be a live performance if you weren't here as well. Thank you.
And can I also say that I've had the most wonderful questions tonight. Really interesting questions that were really seeking into my world. It's been such a pleasure. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for coming. Really so.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching this recording of In Conversation, which supports Kent Opportunity Fund.